I love the way they tell you the recording's in progress.
No, it's really annoying. 'Cause then I can never surreptitiously record people and get dirt on them. They always know when I'm recording them. It's hopeless.
It's not stopped you in the past, though, has it?
You should see the dossier that I have on YouTube.
Okay. This is James. Shut up.
Mhm.
This is Dead Air podcast number 5, of which at least 2 have actually made it onto the internet because of James's incompetence when it comes to stuff like this. And it's a pleasure to have Karen Harradine on. Is it Harradine or Harradine? Who's obviously a very accomplished and well-known writer for the Conservative Woman and elsewhere. So, Karen, what would you like to talk about? I was guessing that if we're going to be serious for a minute, it might be the contagion of anti-Semitism, which is raging through the British establishment at the moment, because I know that's something you feel strongly about. But do you want to say something about yourself first before we address that issue?
Sure. What in terms of myself, in what way? Just, let me know what you'd like me to say. Just that I work as a writer and I like to write, I guess, on the darker things of human nature. God help me. And I'm just grateful when anything of my stuff is published or if anybody reads it. You know, as a writer yourself, how much time and effort it goes into just even producing one.
I don't give any time or effort into it.
I
just see what happens.
But I put in, it can sometimes take me days just to write one piece, making sure that I research properly and that I, in a way, when I do the writing process, I'm almost arguing against myself, saying, okay, I'm writing that, so why am I writing that? And what do I need to back that up with? Does that make sense to me? And if it doesn't, why not? So it becomes quite a laborious process for me. So I'm always kind of grateful with anybody publishes it and reads it.
Well, you're very accomplished and very well respected. So, and Kathy, I'm just going to say something about Kathy Gingle. She's just amazing, and so is Margaret.
Sean isn't angling for a pay rise, I'm sure.
No, they've been very good to me, and I've been very grateful for the opportunity to be published by them, because my work is not something like the mainstream media would publish.
Yes.
So I'm
right. Well, I'm in the same predicament, Karen, because I write about kind of loose, immoral things in Soho, and I was actually turned down by a publication called Filth magazine.
No, James. Let's
I don't know, because they said my writing was too obscene, even for Filth magazine. I understand completely how you feel, Karen.
I think, I'd be very interested to see what you actually wrote for them that was turned down. That's very funny.
I did warn you, Karen. I did say to you in an email today, let's not let him get control of the conversation because it'll go down a very dark path.
Okay, no, I'm being serious now, though. Karen, have you been in London to witness any of these so-called peaceful marches?
I was in London just a few weeks ago, and it wasn't on the weekend. It was on a Monday, and I just felt the whole vibe in London had this terrible menacing energy to it. I actually couldn't wait to get back home to wonderful Wales. I've been shocked but not surprised. I've been documenting anti-Semitism for a very long time. In fact, prior to 2020, that is mainly what I wrote about.
Yeah.
And it is, I put on Twitter and on my Facebook account that, Britain can't protect its Jews. And a few people said to me, of course it can. The British people on the whole will do that. And I think that's lovely. But the problem is that the institutions are endemically anti-Semitic. your police force can't protect the Jews, when when the civil service is sending millions of pounds to Hamas and the Palestinian Authority and Iran via the Iran deal, when you have in government many MPs who are virulently anti-Israel, and even, you know, Rishi Sunak, who says he supports Israel. Well, I'm sorry, anybody who says he supports Israel does not promote the two-state solution, which is another way of destroying Israel.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's a systemic thing. It's an institutional thing. I mean, look at the school unions and what goes on in our schools, our universities. This is why I say Britain can no longer protect its Jews. I mean, the very fact that the police bowed down to the anti-Semitic Marxist Black Lives Matter a couple of years ago, it says it all, really, about where they stand. So I wasn't surprised that they were absolutely a dismal failure in policing the Hamas marches. And those were not pro-Palestinian marches, they were Hamas marches, pro-Hamas.
Quite nakedly pro-Hamas, yeah. And do you know, Karen, last night there was, these campaigners against anti-Semitism had this big van with an electronic billboard on it, you know, showing the victims who had been captured and stuff. Anyway, of course, they got mobbed by these feral pro-Hamas loons. And then the police came, and the police didn't protect the campaigners against anti-Semitism. They asked them quietly to turn the electronic billboard off and to just go away. And because they refused to do that, then the police basically raided their van, trying to find any documents they could to perhaps arrest them and take them out of the area, but they couldn't, because everything was legit, you know. But it's just
this is what I mean. Like, the police, it's not only that they won't protect Jewish people, they'll actively go against them, as they did with the campaign against them. I saw that video. It was absolutely horrific. As well as like the Met Police taking selfies with Hamas supporters. Did you see that one photo?
With the child who was actually dressed like a terrorist, yeah.
Yes! I mean, does the Met Police have any idea what that does to a Jewish person living in this country? To see them gleefully smiling at a representation of terrorists whose main aim in life is to kill every Jew on the planet. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
I mean, they wouldn't pose like that with someone dressed as a football hooligan with a Nazi with a swastika tattoo or something. But it's
exactly
the same thing.
This is the big thing. This is the one thing that I have written about and said, that on the left, and our institutions are dominated by the left, that on the left, anti-Semitism is legitimized because it's supposed, you know, the left is supposed to be seen as this virtuous, good thing.
Anti-oppressors and all that sort of role.
Exactly. Whereas I always say, scratch the surface of someone calls themselves anti-racist and you'll find a screaming anti-Semite underneath. That has been my experience with it. And that's not to negate the anti-Semitism on the right, because for sure there is that there. But you know, this country is governed by institutions that are on the left, that are very woke. I mean, part of the word tyranny is anti-Semitism, so it's very woke. And you will have there a deep, deep hatred for Israel, a total misunderstanding of what goes on there, total, it's led by, I would say, blood libels, tropes, and the irony is that a lot of these people pride themselves on being intellectual, whereas actually they just fall headlong into anti-Semitic propaganda from the mainstream media, government, the United Nations, which to me is the root of all evil. It's a perfect storm of things for Jews in this country, unfortunately.
Why is it, Karen, that you think, I mean, looking at some of the marches and also some of these, I've been watching some TikTok videos actually today of people who have only just read Osama bin Laden's letter, I think that it was published in The Guardian, where he was explaining why he attacked America. So I'm seeing some people on TikTok saying, oh my God, I'm completely reevaluating how I looked at Osama bin Laden. I mean, what credulous fools. But also, all the, I'd say, 8 out of 10 of the people in this TikTok video I was watching were female. And I also noticed that almost exclusively the sort of middle-class white activists who are taking the posters, they're all female. the middle class ones on the marches, on the sort of pro-Hamas marches, are almost entirely female. Why is that, do you think?
I think it's several reasons. I think a lot of, so-called, anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, which is actually not pro-Palestinian, but pro-Hamas, pro-Islamist, pro-Iran, because Iran is pulling the strings here. They have this kind of romanticized point of view of the world. This middle-class white women of a certain age who kind of thinks that Israel is the oppressor. I suppose maybe they've gone to universities. Our universities in this country have long been anti-Israel, have long kind of preached the apartheid trope, et cetera, have long delegitimized Israel. There is this very strange love-in between the left and Islamism. I always distinguish between Islam and Islamism because and I always need to say this to people, that there are so many Muslims in this world. You can't say that Islam is a terrible religion and it's violent, because otherwise this planet would be finished. But you do have the sect of Islamism, radical Islam, that is causing all the problems. And that's why I'm always reluctant to tar the entire religion with one brush. I think that's very important. But on the other hand, what happens is these women do this to Jews, to Israel, because they've suddenly taught that Israel is the demon, and it's, and it's country in its institutions, in its kind of chattering classes kind of thing, are taught that America is evil and the devil, and therefore so must Israel, because Israel and America are allied. And it stems very much, I would say, the core of it comes from the 1960s, where Yasser Arafat joined up with the KGB and created the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And that's where this whole Palestinian identity came from. Yasser Arafat was Egyptian. And this was a way for the Soviets to kind of kick the Americans by kicking Israel, kicking their ally in the Middle East, and kicking Israel like that. And so you have, going back decades, a tradition in British universities, and obviously a lot of, these middle-class women would have gone to these universities, etc., read The Guardian, position themselves on the left, and then they get indoctrinated into this kind of thinking. Does that make sense? I hope I've explained.
Yes, that completely makes sense, but I still don't understand why it's mostly women. I mean, you get middle-class chattering class types of men that have gone to these universities and read The Guardian as well.
I would say that a lot of women get hoodwinked into it, thinking this is the virtuous thing. You can't generalize, okay? But I think a lot of women, they want to be loving and nurturing, but like men as well. I think, and this is going to sound terrible, but unfortunately, if you look back to the Holocaust, a lot of the most brutal guards in concentration camps were women.
Well, so it's like George Orwell has a quote similar to that, doesn't he? I think it was either in 1984 or one of his essays where the women, I forget how he phrased it, but basically they were the most sort of zealotish, ardent adherents of the regime, the swaller of slogans and everything.
Yeah. So I think it could be I think it's two things over here. One, that women can be very brutal, as we saw with the Holocaust and the camps. And the other one being that some women want to express how lovely and virtuous and kind they are, because that's what they think women should be, but they do it in a way that they align themselves with those that they think are oppressed, but actually are oppressors. And for some reason, they conveniently forget the fact that they are aligning themselves with a bunch of terrorists who are virulently misogynistic.
Yes.
They don't seem to ask why on TV do Hamas spokesmen, they're always men. Where are the women? And these are Islamists. I'm talking about radical Islam, where women are just treated horrifically. So it's cognitive dissonance. It's the woke middle class thing to do. It's an anti-Americanism, as well as some women, as we've seen talking about the Holocaust, can be very brutal. And I'd say it's not just one reason.
Well, it's like you have these middle-class feminists who are basically betraying their cause by supporting Islamists and terrorists like that. And then you also have these credulous gays who, I mean, they were out there last night, Karen, the gays for Palestine.
crazy. I mean, Hamas has been known to throw gay men off roofs in.
Yeah.
It's documented that a lot of gay men and women and Christians flee Gaza and the West Bank for the sanctuary of Israel. And things obviously are not perfect in Israel because no country is, but at least they got equal rights written in law. I mean, Tel Aviv is known as the pride capital of the world. So it's just like that whole gays of Palestine thing is the epitome of how much the West has regressed. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
Well, there was I had to go past one of these marches a few weeks ago. It was just after the Battle of Ideas. We were going from Church House to where the after party was, and there was these pro-Hamas types, and, and I was walking past them to chants of Batty Boy. I mean, honestly, Karen, can you believe it? Calling me a Batty Boy? I mean, look, I was only wearing an Alexander McQueen scarf, a sex jacket, and an All Saints hat. I mean, I thought that was me being rather butch, to be honest.
There are, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, these Hamas sympathizers, first of all, don't forget that these marches have been organized by Hamas.
By some people with links to Hamas, yeah.
Organizations affiliated to Hamas. They have plenty of use for idiots because if you really lived in a society which Hamas runs, i.e. the one in Gaza, if you were gay, you stood no chance. If you're a woman, you stand no chance. If you're Christian, you stand no chance. I mean, Gaza is Judenfree. There's no Jews who live in Gaza. And they'd be killed immediately. It's quite extraordinary.
And yet, of course, there's Muslims in Israel. There's, as I say, gays in Israel, and yet the left accuse Israel of genocide when there can never be Jews in Gaza.
I mean, this is the thing. The fact that they say this about, there are two things with this with Gaza, with so-called genocide. One, the Palestinian population has risen every year in Gaza and the West Bank. Genocide. That's the first thing. The second thing is over and over again, Hamas has proven to be liars over the toll of dead and injured, as well as the fact that they really conveniently skip over the fact that they hide their weapons under schools and hospitals and school playgrounds and homes, that they hide themselves in the tunnels. They do not build bomb shelters for their people. In fact, Hamas has said they wouldn't bother doing that because the people are not important. They can be sacrificed. Their fighters who are important. This is a bloodthirsty, genocidal.
Well, it is a death cult, absolutely.
And it's frightening that you have thousands and thousands of people marching for them in British streets.
Well, it's also quite frightening. I mean, some of my friends even just credulously took as word the death count that Hamas provided, and then but when I said, what, you're seriously trusting the terrorist organization Hamas to provide accurate figures of how many have been killed in Gaza? And then they said, well, what about these figures from Save the Children? I said, yeah, where do you think they got those figures from? There's no one on the ground in Gaza apart from Hamas.
Exactly. Save the Children, Oxfam, anything to do with the United Nations, and including the World Health Organization and UNRWA. All of these organizations are not Israel friendly, and they will take the word of Hamas over anything else. As I've said in one of my pieces, and as I said in Twitter, people want to believe the best of Hamas and the worst of Israel.
Yes.
And that's a huge issue. That the West is, I mean, this is just watching the West implode. We've seen it over the last few years, but this has just stepped it up to off the charts level.
Have you noticed, by the way, Karen, that Sean's going for the Hamas leader look? Honestly, he's been issuing fatwas to me left, right, and centre. Honestly.
Oh, that's right.
I was just enjoying the conversation.
Or do you
loved the bit when it was speculation that James Bembridge could be thrown off a car park.
Don't go to Gaza, James.
I'd push him. Right.
Oh dear. Well, come on, Sean.
Can I say something serious?
Yes, please do. Yeah, please.
Okay, I'll think of it in a minute. No, all right, I'll come up with this. That what Karen's saying about Hamas reminds me of, I did my first degree in Northern Ireland at Queen's University, Belfast. And there was a certain significance of the left-wing community that were, the atrocities of the IRA were just invisible to them. They just didn't realize what was going on. So I think it's an embedded point in the human story that if you settle on a certain point of view, you don't see anything else.
Yeah. And I think that's very dangerous because we've seen it, like people become very polarized in what they say and what they believe. And the more polarized a society is, the easier it is for our awful leaders and government, etc., to treat us with the contempt that they have with us. You know, we're, you know, kind of so polarized, and it's not about infighting, it's polarization of society leads to literally aspects of a failed state, which makes it easier to control us and build back better, as we know the things being about. I mean,
we haven't heard that expression for a while, have we?
We mustn't forget it, because a lot of anti-Israel stuff is being led by the same organizations, the same supranational organizations, like United Nations, like WEF, etc., that have imposed Agenda 2030 onto us. I mean, the UN really, everything comes back to them and their cronies and their collaborators, like the WEF, like the Gates Foundation, like the Chinese Communist Party and Iran. All of these governments, regimes, organizations are virulently, if they're not anti-Israel, they're anti-Semitic. If they're not kind of taking a side, which to me is actually just as bad, they are pursuing Agenda 2030. So for me, the moral stance and the moral thing to do is to stand up for Israel against these supranational organizations like United Nations and its collaborators, who are at the core of this anti-Semitism. If you don't stand up to it, like, for example, you know, if Israel, God forbid, does fall, which will endanger not just Jewish lives, but Christian lives and Muslim lives are the ones who don't, you know, align with Islamism, and will completely finish off the West. And how better for the UN to rule us if we're all under the thumb of a caliphate? How easy it would be.
That's the point that's not been made, isn't it? It's not been made or emphasized is that Hamas are the biggest threat to the Palestinian people. It's not Israel.
No, but I think, you know, I'm rapidly losing sympathy for the Palestinian people. I've written with sympathy about them many times, but I've lost a lot over the last month or so, where they're literally standing in the streets cheering,
spitting at the bodies. Yeah.
And that to me, you know, kind of, you know, there can people say, oh, free Gaza from Hamas, or whatever. But I mean, given what's happened over the last 6 weeks or so, I'm wondering just how many of the Palestinians living there are Hamas sympathizers. Yes, you have that rebel, etc., but it seems like things have shifted. I mean, I've documented over the years how many Palestinians in Gaza are very anti-Hamas, but I think that has shifted now, and that is very worrying. And that all comes back to the UN as well. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. This is why I can't understand people in the freedom movement who are not supporting Israel, who are pro-Hamas and pro the UN on this. I mean, it's just extraordinary to witness them undoing all the good work they have done by siding with those who want to implement the pandemic treaty in Agenda 2030. I mean,
it's not astonishing to me, Karen, that the UN is a deeply dysfunctional organization. I've been thinking that for a while. So if we could take it back, lockdown, you wrote about that as I have done as well. I think we have 5
minutes, by the way.
Okay,
so you've got 5 minutes.
I have no say.
He's too tight to write for.
No, it's the
Karen's
Zoom
our
thing.
guest, so let's Karen speak.
Okay, about the UN and lockdown.
Lockdown. I think lockdown is actually bled into. I think
100%. As I said, like, lockdown was a gateway into Agenda 2030, which is the ultimate end game.
I think that's absolutely right. Sorry to interrupt you, but that's an extremely good way of putting it.
Thank you. I
might steal it, actually.
And I was very shocked by many people who have been writing on the United Nations, like I have, who had pinpointed just how anti-West and anti-Semitic the United Nations was, and all its subsidiaries, like the World Health Organization, suddenly just fell for the propaganda and brainwashing that came from the United Nations and the World Health Organization on COVID-19 and lockdown. Suddenly forgot everything that the damage that the United Nations had done to Israel, had done to us Jews, had done to the West, and suddenly went along with the whole lockdown propaganda courtesy of the Chinese Communist Party. And that really shocked me, that so many people could actually forget the huge damage the United Nations has done to our world, and suddenly become brainwashed drones. And we see it now with Israel and Gaza. People are now brainwashed drones, very kind of very easy to manipulate, I guess, and useful idiots for Iran.
Can I just interject very quickly? What do you think about, some of the quite prominent so-called freedom fighters who were against lockdown?
Yeah.
They now, I mean, like, I won't name the person that I'm thinking of, but yesterday on Twitter, I saw him say that if anyone asks me what side of a war I'm on, I say that I'm on neither side. I was thinking, it's not hard to take the opposite side of feral, murderous bastards that are Hamas, But I'm seeing this a lot, it's since well, I suppose it's still there. It's just kind of a knee-jerk reaction to go against any kind of what they deem to be a mainstream narrative or something. They think it's being edgy by not opposing Hamas. I just don't get it.
I think there's several strands to it. I think it's a cowardly position. I think it creates them as useful idiots for the UN, which they, profess to despise, but are actually now puppets for them. I think as well that it's from sheer ignorance as well. They really don't understand the geopolitics in the Middle East. And I would say as well that for some, not all of them, but for some, it's latent anti-Semitism. And they have completely forgotten that their fight for freedom should involve anything that is, pro-democracy, pro-life, and should oppose anything that is fascist in nature, which Islamism is, as well as anything that is a death cult, which Hamas is.
Well,
can't argue with that.
No. Right, so we've got 1 minute left. Karen, you've been a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for coming on our pod.
Karen, will you come back?
Oh my God, I'd love to. You guys are great, and I really appreciate being asked.
Well, I'm great, but he's a complete.
Oh, for goodness! Don't you must excuse Sean, Karen. The Priory did, and it's getting hopeless now.
That's not true. That's not true. I was expelled from the.
That's what I meant. But it's getting impossible. It's getting impossible. It's getting impossible now, Karen. I keep on sending Sean, the Dignitas flyers, but he never takes the hint.
No, you guys are great, and it's really nice to connect with you, James, again, even though I'm not seeing you, and it's really nice to finally see you, Sean, and really connect with you. And I hope what I said makes sense. Sometimes writing is easy because then
I'm not a Hamas leader, I promise.
But no, thank you very much for having me on your podcast. I'm really.
No, would he come back again? Seriously?
Oh, absolutely! If you guys want me back, I would be delighted. Thank you.
Super, Karen. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and really nice to kind of chat with you both. And thank you again for asking me.
How's things in Wales? I know you've just moved there.
No, we moved here last year.